in 1 to 2 years from now, we're not going to have any more vulnerabilities. In the next 1 to 2 years, 95% of all code will be written by AI. But at the same time, we'll actually have AI scanning, remediating, and fixing vulnerabilities as it goes, right? Are we going to win 100%? Of course not. But I think we're going to reach this point is like we're going to get to software that's more secure, it's more private, and more compliant because of AI.
Hello, everyone. This is your host, Manoj Tandon. Welcome to another episode of Dark Rhino Security, Security Confidential. Please hit the like and subscribe button. It really helps us out with the algorithms. It helps us out with the ratings. It helps us out in bringing great content to you. So show us a little bit of love and hit those like and subscribe buttons below. And I would love to introduce you to a great guest that we have today. We're honored to have him. He's Mr. David Cross. He is a veteran of cybersecurity, 30 years in the business. That's a lot longer than many people who are listening to this have been alive, but that besides the point. He is the Chief Information Security Officer, leading Oracle SaaS. Well, I should say he was leading Oracle SaaS cloud security architecture. He's helped Microsoft and Google Cloud. He's helped build and secure some of the world's largest cloud platforms. Former U.S. Navy electronics warfare specialist, and then has 30 patents to his name. That's quite a credential resume. David, thank you for being here.
I'm excited. I've been looking forward to this. Certainly, I'm now the CISO for Atlassian, right? So that's my most important role. And I'm also very active in the cybersecurity community. I'm a venture partner with Rain Capital VC, angel investor, and other things. So, I keep adding to the list, I guess you would say.
That's fantastic. And Atlassian know that technology well. We run into integrations with it, with Okta all the time.
And I'm sure we're going to talk about it today.
So before we get to that, we want to get your background because there's young people here listening that would want to know, how do I become David? What was the path? How do you build such a great career, and how did you get into cyber?
Great question. Certainly. I say work hard, play hard. That's my philosophy. People see that in my travel blog, davidcrosstravels.com. But it kind of started with the Navy to a degree, right? I went to the service. It's kind of one of my family's tradition. We go into the service, after college, and really it's kind of serving the country. And that really kind of gives you a step into the world. But really, why cybersecurity? Well, I was in electronic warfare. I was in, the EA-6B Prowler Squadron in the First Gulf War. And so that kind of tickled something. And then I got this great book here behind my head, right? On the way back from the Gulf War, I stopped at the Navy Exchange in Naples, Italy. And I got this book back here, Applied Cryptography, by Schneier, right? And I was reading that and I said, all right, here's an interesting world, right? And that kicked things off of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. It all started from there.
Fantastic. So how many years were you in the Navy?
I was actually 5 years active duty. And there was kind of the drawdown to a degree, things like that. And then ultimately I did 3 years Army Reserve as well, because it's easier to do reserve duty in the Army versus the Navy. But, 8 years total service, as part of that. But yeah, after the military, went to graduate school. And then I joined Microsoft, and I started focusing on security, and it never stopped from there.
Now, when you joined Microsoft, were they still building a version of DOS or no?
Yes, they were, right? I was really interestingly, I joined right in you remember the Windows 2000?
Yes, very much so.
Worked for one of our customers there on the Windows 2000 joint development program. And I got heavily involved in Kerberos, the early days I was in Kerberos in Windows, and PKI certificates. And I started writing all these white papers for Microsoft about the public key infrastructure, the certificate server. Remember Exchange Key Management Server, certificate server? I think sometimes you can still find the white papers that I wrote in the early days. Gosh, this is, 25
Now, this was post the PGP controversy then.
I think it was still kind of going on right then, wasn't it? I could probably still find my 3.5-inch floppy disks, right? With the C source code on that from a long time ago. But yes,
I still have it.
sure.
I know I have that. In fact, I found that floppy just the other day cleaning out. For those of our audience who don't remember, what PGP is, pretty good privacy. And back in the day, there was a controversy where the federal government really went after the author of that because it was
Phil Zimmerman, I think it was, wasn't it?
Phil Zimmerman.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. Phil Zimmerman, because they said it was advanced cryptography that violated national security or something to that effect. And at the time, I remember in college, we bought the book and scanned the source code, and then compiled it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, this goes way back. I remember that, and it's kind of like, remember that all the 3.5-inch floppies, and then I think it did convert them to over to said, hey, I'm not going to have these much longer, to CDs, right? And I have to start thinking about, okay, I can start converting some of those CDs to SSDs, right? But they all kind of seem to die off over time, right?
well, it's the way technology goes.
I was thinking about, even if you take the source from PGP, how many people, I mean, youngsters now that, yes, they're developers or programmers, can say, how many could actually take the C source and actually, with all the headers and libraries, and actually get it to compile, right? How many actually know how to compile anything anymore these days?
Well, thanks to Claude and ChatGPT and others, take your favorite pick, whatever you really like. Technologies, LLMs like that, you can ask it. It'll tell you how to get all the downloads onto your laptop and compile whatever you would like to compile. But you're right. Natively, I don't think people know. I don't think the fundamentals of how you architected those things, the constructs of the technology itself, that's something you learn by practice. It's something you got to do. It's not something that you can read and now you know it. You got to practice it.
Absolutely. I go back to the university days, right? We had our operating systems, book, or class, right? Talk about the dining philosophers, right? It's like, hey, we're going to manipulate the stack, using inline, assembly, right? In the C code and things like that. The things you can't do anymore. How can people even think about that? And then let's go back to Kerberos and PKI, X59 certificates. I actually kind of wondering now, does Claude even know about ASN.1 and how to compile ASN.1 structures, right? Who even knows what ASN.1 compiler is, right? So I'm not sure.
Good question. I've never tried. But machine code, if you're trying to write malware, you should know machine language.
Yeah.
Because it will enable you to do a lot of things. And I will leave it at that. I won't be the guy that spills all the beans. Not that there's a lot of beans to be spilt out there, but it does. If you know machine language, even today, you can get around a lot of controls.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's what some of you think of the various models and things like that. They have the guardrails in it, is that, hey, maybe they wouldn't let you do these crafting of a duplicate X59 certificate of things.
Oh, it absolutely will. You just got to know how to ask the question right, David.
It's all about the prompting.
If you just tell it to write you malware, yeah, it's going to throw a fit, but that's not what you do. There was I don't know if you remember Tom Clancy as an author.
Of course. Yes, right? Of course, the classic books.
Yeah, he had, and I forget which one of his books. I used to be a big Clancy fan 30 years ago, but one of his books had, I think it was The Sum of All Fears, where bad guys build a nuclear weapon. But he said, where does the technology, how is data, the most secretive data, actually shared? And he goes to describe that nuclear technology is not shared out in the open. You couldn't look up how to build a fusion device or a fission device or something like that. What you went and did was you looked up white papers on star formation, how stars worked, fusion principles of stars. And that was his way of saying, you must go and ask the questions indirectly. And I tell you, that's not me. That's Mr. Clancy. And that lesson applies today, David.
Absolutely.
To these LLMs. Absolutely. He was ahead of his time. He was prompting a system to give up the goods. Um,
Yeah. So Manoj, I can't wonder now. It's like, hey, could I ask name your favorite LLM, saying, hey, here's a legitimate X59 certificate. I want you to go create a one that has the same hash as it. Can the models go create that, keeping the key, right, reverse engineering that, and go creating one that has the same hash, and so I can then spoof an identity. I wonder if it's that good. Now I'm almost in trouble. Am I going to get in trouble to even thinking about this?
no, you won't get in trouble, and I will bet you a penny that it will do it. It'll do it. There's a couple experiments you can do. It's just going to be in the way you set up your prompts, and it will do it.
I guess maybe then the dangerous thing is actually how many tokens is going to take to generate that key, right? It's going to be a lot of, it's not going to be a trillion
It's cheap. It
tokens.
depends. What are you planning on doing with it? I mean, I think AI. I mean, I'd love to get your opinion on this because is democratized to a degree some of these things because now you don't need to be an expert coder. You don't have to be an expert knowledge worker about ABC technologies. You, as a layperson, can if you have the mind to do it, build something pretty sophisticated at a fraction of the cost of what it would take you to get all those talents pulled together.
I would agree and disagree, right?
Okay.
It's amazing. I'll say with some of my observations and experiences here, it's amazing what it can do. But before, say, hey, here's 3 months to create this proof of concept. Now you can do it in 3 hours. But at the same time, even though it's getting better and better, right, compared to a year ago or certainly 2 years ago, is an element is there is still hallucination. There still is,
Oh yeah.
errors, issues. And you do need, I think, for two parts. One is uh, maybe it's not coding, but just asking questions and getting answers, is that you do need to have expertise to realize, no, that's not true, right? And
Correct.
you can still catch it. We're not at we're that long trail. Are we ever going to get to 0%, hallucination, or 100%, guaranteed factual? Probably never, right? There's always be a long tail. That's one. The second thing is like, great, you generated all this code. It's working. Oh, there's a bug. And so let's say, well, what if it can't fix the bug? And so use the layperson like, well, if you don't know how to code, how are you going to fix the bug? Right. And I think there's still an element is I like Python as well. It's amazing now. It's like, I got the idea, go build this in Python. But every now and then you're getting a bug and like, I need to go look at the SDK. I need to look at documentation. Why am I getting this error? And the AI, the coding agent cannot fix it or understand it, but I have to understand it, right, and then prompt it to fix it. So I still think there's a lot of need for expertise, and I think the people that have the expertise are the most powerful with AI, without question. It is a force multiplier, and that's what's quite exciting. I think for this at this time.
I would agree with you. I would go along with that. See, in my mind, at least from what my experience has been with it, back in engineering school, you really didn't get a lot of points for getting the question right. All the points were in the setup of the problem. That was, I mean, by training, I'm an aerospace engineer. And that's how those tests were laid out. It was all about, can you set this up right? If you can set it up right, then, the professors were always like, in the real world, there'll be 100 people that are going to double check all this and you'll get it sorted out. But if you can set it up right and you have a sense of what your outputs should be in range and you know what the sniff test is, you're going to be able to figure this problem out. The nuances will work themselves out. And I think that is true with LLMs. If you know how to set up the problem, be very specific about what you're asking, you have an idea of what a correct output looks like, then you can actually force it to even check itself. And I've had great success, especially in financial analysis with this, David. If you let it loose by itself, it gives you terrible results. But if you tell it, this is what the answer must be, I'm telling you what the answers are here. Now, I need you to set up this thing so it always yields this. You look at this, A, B, C, D, and E, and then do A, B, C, D, and E to that set. and this is what you need to be at. Then it will iterate on itself. But if I just gave it, here, solve this, no.
This is actually the pivot I always like to take on is when you have to create something, whether it's for finance or for coding or for a recommendation or analysis, you know, I always like to say, I always having the other prompts of saying, okay, what is inaccurate? What's an exaggeration?
Yeah.
Where's the resource consumption? Where is there a bug? It's amazing when you give it that different prompts, right? And the different pivots, right? It will find all the things that, yeah, it thinks the code is fine, but that wasn't its mission. Its mission was not to find the errors and bugs. But so you give the other prompts to do that. It's like threat modeling, right? My friend Adam Shostak, right? Threat modeling. It's like, it's not about what you want it to do, what could go wrong, right? And you identify all the things that could go wrong and then finding those, right? And I think that's a big way to think about using the LMs is just create it, find all the problems as well. So then the end result would be what you really desire.
Absolutely. So tell me something. When having worked in the SaaS heavy organizations like Microsoft, Google, Oracle, what were some of the things when you guys were architecting this? How do you go about securing that cloud architecture? And is the security that was architected has it evolved since the foundation, or the foundation has remained the same and you've just evolved the perimeter of it to make it much more secure? I'm curious. It's a curiosity question more than anything else.
You know, uh, when I think about this a little bit is, I hate to say it, although it's not as popular as it used to be, right? But I'm going to say DevSecOps, right? And why is that important? Because I think the real transition or transformation in the industry to a degree is, especially going to these SaaS applications and services and cloud, right? Is really thinking about things end to end, right? Versus the historical, COTS, package software. Like, I own this feature, I own this component, and it all gets put together and it works, right? And that's where we still always had the pen testers and the QA and the SDETs and things like that, all doing things. But really, I think for SaaS to be successful, the world and industries ran into challenges until we kind of shifted to that a little bit of that DevSecOps, right? It's like, hey, developer, you own that end to end, not just your component. It works end to end. You own it, you deploy it, right? You manage it, you service it, right? And when you put all those things together, that's when you actually get a more secure, reliable, and performant, system versus you just putting all the Legos together, right? And that's where all the cracks happen. And so I think we've improved enormously about that. Now, I think you and I were talking earlier before the podcast element is then, well, a lot of companies are acquiring, right? Naturally, as an industry, we're always going to have consolidation. We have big companies doing, suites or platforms, right? And bringing things in, right? We know lots of Fortune 500 companies that do this. But I think one of the challenges we all run into is, great, I got the suite or I got the platform, but they're actually not all integrated, right? And when those gaps occur and those cracks appear, this is where we run into challenges from a security standpoint, from an experience standpoint, from a performance standpoint. And I think that's still an emerging and growing area.
I think it will always be. I mean, this has been the challenge since the day software first started being written is, integration of disparate systems that were built in vacuums, essentially, and then they've been brought together. And that's been a time-honored challenge, and I don't see that challenge ever disappearing. I guess the question with cybersecurity is there really a technological solution to the problem of cyber?
Well, I know it's controversial, but I mentioned that I keep thinking about it, and it was one of the unprompted conferences that was created by Gadi Everin, and I think he and Heather Adkins from Google. They talked about, in 1 to 2 years from now, we're not going to have any more vulnerabilities. We're going to go through this path, right? We're going to take all the existing code, whether we're using Mythos or Daybreak or whatever model we want, working on fixing all these vulnerabilities for the existing code base. But now, in the next 1 to 2 years, 95% of all code will be written by AI. But at the same time, we'll actually have AI that can actually scanning, remediating and fixing vulnerabilities as it goes, right? There's a point. Are we going to win 100%? Of course not, right? But I think we're going to reach this point is like we're going to get to software that's more secure, it's more private, and more compliant because of AI. But we've got to go through this curve, and it will get better and better. But it'll never be zero vulnerabilities, zero bugs. Of course not. That's the law of physics. But I think that's what we're going to see in the next couple of years. I'm a bit optimistic about this.
I guess my argument would be even if the software were 100% secure, which it will never be, I think we agree with that, or any technology, you still at the foundation of it have the human being. And and you build a vault out of some fancy unobtainium and I walk the bad guy into the vault, it doesn't really matter that the vault was even there to begin with. And that to me is the part of the cybersecurity, which I think is the biggest part of that equation, that for some reason it doesn't get the advertisement that the tech does.
Oh, absolutely. As another example, I think this guy's book back here, my friend Ira Winkler, right? Kind of saying, yeah, the humans were always going to make the mistakes, right? Because we're human, right? And today, right, how do people most get in, right? Whether it's phishing, it's still a human mistake, right?
Sure.
Social attacks, other types of things, because we're human. But the idea behind it is because we're human, is like, how do we have defense in depth, right? We can have these automated and other controls combined with the human, because we will make mistakes.
I think in that defense in depth part, it's training habits into people and getting them to understand the why behind it. That would be a major breakthrough. That is because if people understood why you don't want to do something, instead of being told, don't do something, tell them why you might not want to do that.
I can't resist jumping in now again and coming back to my
Please.
military experience. It's like why I'm a big fan. I love promoting veterans, right, into cybersecurity, right, into companies, right. And there's two reasons, right. One is there's a number of things that in the military you learn the training, the honesty, the integrity, the ethics, being a team, focus on details, loyalty. But in the military is that it's about it. We train. You train like you fight. Train, 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 right? And that's what it's all about. Is so that sometimes I think of when you can take veterans, they can come in and they know how to operate the playbook. They know how to operate under fire. They know how to operate things and not just be misled, saying not be distracted by, hey, the attacks are occurring, but no, I'm focused because we train like we fight, right? And that is one of the big benefits that sometimes veterans can come into companies and help in not just cybersecurity, but also sometimes the overall reliability and operations. And it's a great asset to many companies.
Absolutely. And what you're describing is maturing an organization in cyber or any other paradigm that it needs to evolve in. And I guess that is a question. When you look at what Google and Microsoft and the like have all done from internal processes and maturing as organizations, what separates them from folks who may be even of a similar size but don't have that maturity? What advice would you have for them, or what goes wrong there? Because you see a lot. I mean, we see companies that are substantial in size that just somehow have not matured in terms of process, whether it be cybersecurity or otherwise.
You know, it's a great question, right? And thinking about it a little bit is, historically, a lot of people, I think they got into the these maturity models, but I think the maturity models, right? They're so complex, right? It was more work to understand your maturity, right, than it is to actually achieve maturity, right? And so I've actually been talked to a lot of companies recently is using the NIST risk framework, right? So the NIST
Okay.
one is a little simpler, right? And everybody's like, develop your appetite, right? What is your appetite for these things, right? And then once you know what your appetite, it's not just what's your maturity, but saying that, okay, is this above your appetite or below your appetite? And therefore, this is what you need to do. It really seems to help much more companies actually get to a better state of understanding what risks they want to accept explicitly, what do they not want to accept, and then what do they need to do, right? And a lot of people know me. I'm a big fan of the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid, right? And like, but if you have these complex maturity models and frameworks, no one understands it. Then you have to hire all these people to actually to run it. No, that's not the right thing. If you can't understand it in one sentence, then you're doing the wrong thing.
That's brilliant. And I would encourage all our audience that's listening to really pay attention to that, because simplicity brings reliability, David.
Yes, yes, it does.
Right? And that can't be argued. And if you then you will be predictably reliable if you follow that sort of approach. But it seems like a lot of people, that's not the way the industry as a whole or the regulation being imposed. I mean, you look at the slew of regulations coming upon companies, whether it be GDPR or it be the New York State Privacy Act, or it be, you know, whatever legislation is now being proposed about AI. It changes every day.
Ah, this is really, I think this is a big challenge for a lot of organizations and companies around the world, right? And many companies, like larger companies here, we've got policy people, we've got experts in various countries and regulations and things, but that's for the large companies. But what about all the small, medium enterprises, right? They have 1,000, 3,000 people. Can they have policy experts? Probably not, right?
No.
And this is where I've seen companies like, they're AI based, but like open policy. Hey, the companies can say, "Hey, how's this going to affect me? How do I need to comply with this? How do I, operate and target this?" Right? And because you may not have that expertise, but you can get the service to provide that to you into your context. And I think that's a big evolution here, because I want to be pessimistic here, but like if every state in the union and every country in the world is going to have its own AI policy, what company or organization could possibly survive in that? They can't, right?
You can't. You can't. It's not practical. And then you're going to end up with the same, let's check the box. It'll turn into a legal department is what's going to happen.
Ugh,
You'll
absolutely.
have a bunch of lawyers who will sit down and say, well, did we meet this? What do we need to meet this? We can say we checked it. Now let's move on. And it'll be unintended consequences will occur.
Yep. Yep. So I think many companies and organizations here in the state, hey, you need to look at these services to help you and those type of things, because they're AI based, but that's actually a good thing to help you because the humans can't scale to that.
Correct.
I mean,
That,
I can't resist asking you, right? Today, if you hear about something new and saying, "Hey, do we need to comply with this?" I can't resist asking. Do you not use AI to first ask that question and get you the initial results of what you need to do, or do you go directly to your lawyer or policy person?
we don't go directly to the lawyer or policy person, especially if we know the bounding parameters of what we need to comply with. Then why don't we have our friendly research assistant do some homework for us and see what it digs up? Now, it might hallucinate and give us some obviously bad answers. But yeah, I would venture whoever has access to those models, I would venture they'll probably use them. And so that brings up a question. On companies, there's some organizations that are fighting the adoption of LLMs or fighting the adoption of using AI in a certain way. To me, that could be a losing battle, but what are your thoughts on how does an organization go about adopting it? I mean, it's at this point, the employee is going to want to take the path of least resistance for their job function.
I think it's three things. The first, I would say, it's like, okay, you've never been swimming before, so therefore, do you just throw someone in the ocean, or you let them, stick their feet in the pool first, right? And I think that's part of it. Is that one, people have to be carefully introduced into a new thing. The second thing is in how you lead by example, right? Is that you show what you can do in that given role, in that given function, whether it's in finance or legal or cybersecurity or incident response, is first show what could be done, right, by someone, right? And then people say, oh, maybe it is valuable. Oh, I could do that. And then third, I think the element is giving the training, right? Now, if we go back, how many years ago was this? 10 years ago, when the ML was coming out, and you're weighing, you had to just course like, wow, my calculus is so rusty, right? I'm struggling with this. But now I'm slightly exaggerating, but literally in just like maybe 40 hours of potential different types of training, people can learn to use AI to build prompts, to build skills, right? And types of things. And so give people a little time saying, okay, let's just dip your feet in the pool a little bit. Let me show you an example of what's already been done. And give you a little training. You can try it yourself in a safe way. And then I'm finding that 95% of the time people go, wow, I had no idea that the water was warm. It's safe. There's no sharks and I can swim. And it's that leap, but it can happen quite quickly compared to other things in the past.
As a CISO, how do you combat the data leakage
Mm.
potential?
The This is an area I think for CISOs around the world is I think there's two things that we're seeing in the industry. What's first, the first one I'll talk about the data leak prevention and detection, right? Is of course we had DLP, right? It's like people leaking things through email or putting it to your favorite, cloud storage, right? That's one. Kind of got a handle on that. But now I think one of the biggest challenge is now people like everyone's going to use it. There's people going to use AI. You have your corporate ones, and you have all these other ones around the world. People are like, I want to try it. Can you block every website? Can you block every tool? Now, how hard you try, the days of we're blocking websites, can't do it anymore, right? So this is where most CISOs, you need DOP, right? Basically, so people saying, don't put that data, right? That's sensitive data. That's customer data. That's PII. Nope, that does not go to that AI. Can't do that, right? Helping people to not make mistakes, right? That's one. And I think that most companies need that. The second one is we're building, everyone's vibe coding, building agents, licensing agents. And so go back a couple weeks ago to the Gartner conference in Maryland there. And they labeled it the guardian agents, right? And so I think this is where you need everyone that's using agents, building agents, vibe coding agents, right? Is you need the guardian agents to say, to make sure, oh, don't make a mistake. Oh, don't go download that bad package. Oh, don't leak that sensitive information to name your favorite cloud storage types of things. There's a number of them out there: Manifold, Gnostic, Striker, many out there that you can do that. But the reality is, everybody needs it now. It's kind of like endpoint protection, right? Can you live without endpoint protection on a laptop in any company anymore? Nope. I say you can't live without guardian agents, everybody. And I also say you can't live without DLP anymore. Those are fundamental things that everyone needs to have, in my opinion.
How is a medium-sized business going to adopt that? That can get quite expensive for them because with DLP, you're always writing policy. You should be, at least. You should always be checking it, right? And so you need a team to manage it.
Yeah, good question. I think I think with large enterprises, you're going to see that, hey, they're going to use multiple browsers and different things and some different tools. They're much more open, right? Especially development environments, so high tech that we're in, right? But I think the small, medium enterprises, things like that, they can more likely lock down to saying, no, we're only using this browser, right? Or we're going to do a secure browser. And those type of restrictions can make it, I think, much simpler and controlled than ever before, because they're not going to have everybody trying their own little tool, their own different browsers, those type of things. And so I think that's maybe one of the solutions that that segment should look at.
So as a larger organization, what kind of third-party risk mitigation controls do you impose upon your smaller vendors then that may fit exactly the category that we were talking about here, where
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an element is I'll maybe switch it back to you quickly and say that, look, do you ever accept using a vendor that doesn't have a SOC 2 audit? A few years ago you might have. Nowadays, would you do that? No way, right?
no.
So I think, are we going to eventually see to what's the AI one? What, ISO 42001, right? I think eventually we're going to say, nope, every vendor, you got to have that ISO audit and compliance, right? I think we're going to continue seeing that more and more. And then this is also when the whole third party risk management systems come into play, right? Is that how to help you to evaluate the vendors and tracking the vendors and hey, my gosh, they just failed a SOC audit, or no, they just got breached, which we see from time to time, right? And do you have a whole team monitoring that and managing those? Nope, that doesn't scale. So I think this is the new area of AI based third TPRMs is important.
That's interesting. So have AI do the third party compliance.
Absolutely, because it's always changing, right? And I think this is why you're seeing a number of companies out there that are really becoming good in this space to helping that. Because historically, what did we have? We had program managers. Here, let's onboard a vendor. Let's do the analysis. And not many things changed, but now it's so dynamic, right? I want to mention names. Well, we can say, okay, there's the Move It one that was that last year? The Move It. How many people knew they had Move It? How many people knew it had been breached? All those type of things. Like, do you have a program managers monitoring every software vendor, their status anymore? Nope. So this is where I think the AI based services to help you in this space.
What about embedded systems? So when you look at that from, if you're acquiring component pieces from third parties, and they have embedded software in them, you don't know what would you worry about as a sizzle there, or how would you handle that?
You know
Don't
that
mean to put you on the spot there, David. I'm just
no,
curious with your
no, this is
experience.
I really have mixed feelings about this one. And I'll explain. It's certainly, we know this is a very difficult space, right? The firmware, UEFI, all those type of
Yep,
things, things get rooted,
exactly.
right? We know it's all technically possible, right? We all know that name your favorite agencies, have done things like that, right? And so it's very difficult to do. Now, at the same time, this is like kind of my other angle that I think about it is saying, okay, can you give me an example where this has happened to a commercial company in the past 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? Outside of, Snowden leaking all those things, I'm going to say illegally, right? But anyways, but tell me a commercial company that's been hit that they had rooted firmware, in their environment. It's possible it could happen, but at the same time, I'm with a slight bit of skepticism, right? Is it a really major priority compared to other things like AI prompt injection right now?
That is a very pragmatic, because I think most people would say the AI prompt injection is a much bigger issue than rooted system, if you will, right? It is the likelihood there. Sure, it is. I mean, where you get worried about it is medical devices, but and places like critical functions. But again, you have a good question there. Give us an example.
Yeah. Now, if
And
you're in the defense industry, of course, right? And that's part of the defense industry, those things like that. You can even argue like Microsoft Service devices or Xboxes, right? Are the Xboxes built in the United States? No, they're probably built in China, right, or other places, right? Is there risk that there could be there? Yep. And so in those cases, that when you're in that type of environments, they do need to have those controls in place. But I think that I can go back a little bit to my time, but yeah, we did have all those controls in my Microsoft days on things how they're built, right, and the motherboards and other types of things. But at the same time, when have we seen an example in the past 10 years outside of the hype of? Was there a Bloomberg story that was claiming that there was one, but never came down to the details? So yeah, I,
well, you've got me onto a research project. I actually would like to know the answer to that. I can't cite one off the top of my head that I could say, but I can see it. I mean, you look at all the third party, any software development now, it's not, nobody starts from scratch anymore. Everybody is using libraries. You're going to use open source components. Um, and it's really hard to vouch, like, those are open source components completely secure. Is there something in there? I mean, you would hope there isn't, but hope is not a strategy.
uh, Now, with that said, right, I do think that is certainly the past 3 months, right, the supply chain, the open source packages being compromised, being Trojan and things like that, that is exploding, right, enormously, right. I think that's actually one of the bigger risks now. That is occurring. Now, there's the interesting ones of saying, "Hey, was that the North Koreans that did it or not?" That's that. But there's also just malicious cases that are much simpler. I do think that's one of the more emerging areas for companies that are building, on open source packages and things. Hey, do you have the trust repository? Do you have the threat intelligence, right? Are you looking at your GitHub actions and things like that? And this is where you're seeing a major change, right, in need. I think going forward, that's one of the bigger threats, I think, in the year ahead that everybody start looking at. As for my friends at Step Security, right, they're looking at GitHub actions and things like that, and they're finding all these. Seems like every single week now we're seeing these packages that are compromised that are getting pulled in, and so I think this is one of the more emerging threats that we've seen in a long time. We kind of die down like the Bitcoin mining and all that. You see it every now and then, but now the compromised packages into your repos. Woof, this is the new one, if you ask me.
That being one, what other advancement do you see happening in the world of threats,
Well, we certainly
especially
know.
with LLMs?
Yeah, I think the in the AI space, the two come to mind is certainly we know it's hypothetical. Well, first I'll start with the easy one. The phishing attacks. We are seeing much more sophisticated, targeted
Yeah.
whale phishing, right? Things like that. And it's not really of how the mail was written. It's more of like they collected so much data, and getting people to say, "Oh, wow, this is totally legitimate. I need to go do something." Or I think what they usually do is saying, "Hey, let's talk about John Smith," right? And then Jane Doe's like, "Oh, I need to contact John Smith, right? Because I got all this information to send to him." And like, boop, it now comes the trusted path, right? We're seeing that. That's one. Now, the other one, which we know is saying, hey, are we seeing these sophisticated, compound, complex attacks yet? We have not seen that yet, right? We know it's possible. We know with Mythos and Glasswing, you can do more chaining. But have we seen that hacking occur yet? No, we haven't. We got to keep watch, keep wary, but we have not had evidence of that. The other one is, I think, some people saying that there's going to be the drone or the AI, swarm is going to go and attack, right? Again, possible. We just haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen the signals on that. So we got to keep watching very carefully.
Yeah, every one of those is completely possible, and at some point probably will happen somewhere. Vigilance, as you say. Also, I mean, it's great to have that imagination. I'm really happy to hear, David, that folks like you are thinking like in those terms, because a lot of times we see, not a lot, but there are times when you see people think, well, it's a failure of the imagination that leads to major breaches. But things just like the Titanic couldn't sink. People get into this comfort zone. Well, this can't happen, whatever this may be. And then that is exactly what happens, right? And that's just because you didn't think you could have a breach that way. And but already thinking in those lines, that's really good to see that people are really staying abreast of that and advanced.
Using your analogy there, I think one of the things that's changed a lot in the past 10 years is that, the Titanic's like, there's an iceberg, but how many ships knew that there was an iceberg there? Maybe once or two, but if you're not with radar distance, right, you have to know there was an iceberg. Nowadays, let's talk about attacks, right, and IOCs, right, indicators of compromise or threat intelligence. Nowadays, it's not just social media, but all the venues and vehicles we have, people saying, I've seen this. Boom, I'm sharing it to everybody, right? I'm seeing this attack. Here's a bad IP. Here's malware. It explodes quickly. And so now we have a community of everybody now saying that when something does occur, it's not a secret. It's not like I had no idea that was occurring. It spreads very quickly in a positive way. And I think that's helping us a lot, that we don't need to wait days or weeks to find out something's occurring and it's too late for us to take defensive action.
Well, David, we have a lot more to talk about, but we're at the hour. So we want to give you a couple minutes here to plug whatever it is you'd like to plug and let our audience know about. The floor is yours. What would you like to tell?
Well, I guess I always like to say, I think it's very exciting in itself for here at Atlassian, right? And with AI, it's kind of like enjoying a few years ago is what AI can do. It's amazing, everybody in your organization, when you have this environment and what you can do with AI and use things like Teamwork Graph and you pull everything together. It's amazing how quickly you can solve problems and operate that didn't exist 2 years ago. And so that's why I love it. It's a great when you can ask. I say we've got Rovo. Hey, any given question, a given environment and the status of things, and when you have a teamwork graph put together in your Jira, Confluence, Bitbucket environment, it's amazing. So for me, as a cybersecurity practitioner, right? Yeah, I can say, yeah, it's nice that I get it for free because I work for the company. But honestly, I pay for it myself, right? Because it makes me that much more effective. And I think that's everybody out there. Go use AI. It will extend your capabilities as a force multiplier like you've never seen before.
Great message. It was an honor to have you, David. Thank you for spending a little bit of time with us this afternoon.
I really enjoyed it. I love podcasting, as I mentioned before, right? It's like, I can't wait to download that one into my Zune here and enter it on my next run. And then I also can't wait to schedule the next one because there's so many topics here we didn't get to go into yet.
We didn't even get to. We'd love to have you back. I mean, we were just scratching the surface. I mean, every time you were saying something, I was like, I got 3 more questions here that I could ask, but we're never going to get through everything then. But fantastic. Really appreciate it, David. This was
absolutely
great.
Looking forward to the next one. And hey, everybody, join the community and download this podcast onto your Zoom.
Thank you. Take care, David.